Recently, I came across more than 100 videos on YouTube in just a month, all aimed at criticizing the character of Zainab Al-Ghazali. All these videos are published by the official governmental media channels, that's to say the media controlled by the army. The number of views of all the 100 videos combined are quite insignificant, and one might even think they're not even worth mentioning. And putting aside the fact that I wanted to tell you her story for some time now, I actually thought this is a good opportunity to show these media channels with all their means and resources dedicated to distort facts and tarnish her image. I wanted to show them that they are nothing more than worthless cockroaches in front of the truth. So shall we start the story? Alright, let's go. Zainab Muhammad Al-Ghazali Al-Jubaili, also known as Hajja Zainab, was born on January 2nd, 1917 in a village called Meet Yaish, located in the Meet Gamer district of Dakalia Governorate in Egypt. Her father, Muhammad Al-Ghazali, was a scholar of Al-Azhar at the time, and he raised his children with an Islamic upbringing. He even used to call her Nusaybah bint Ka'b al-Ansariyah. He was comparing his daughter to Imara, the companion who fought with Prophet Muhammad in many battles and had great feats. Zainab's father raised her with this mindset from a young age. In her book, Days from My Life, she tells how her father once drew a circle in dirt, gave her a stick and said, "The enemies of the faith are inside this circle, Nusaybah. Strike them with your sword and then tell me how many you have defeated." Of course, he was teaching her to defend herself, as he believed that Islam is a religion of strength and resilience.
But Abuda, is it really okay to fight the oppressors? Where is our tolerance and our moderate faith?
Tolerance, Asuma, applies to your behavior with others regardless of their religion and background. You share their joys and console their sorrows. But if someone, no matter who they are, offends or attacks you, and you still turn the other cheek, that's definitely not called tolerance. Zainab's father died in the year 1928. Zainab was still in elementary school when her dad passed away. She was barely 11 years old. Her older brothers moved to Cairo and took Zainab and her mother with them in 1932. The environment in Cairo was a completely different environment from the village where Zainab grew.
Yes, indeed, the heat there is unbearable. I visited them once in Ramses and I thought I was going to die from the heat, but there's someone there who makes some really nice hot dogs. Real dogs.
As we mentioned in an episode about Hassan al-Banna, al-Banna moved from Ismailia to Cairo in the same year, 1932, and there he began establishing and spreading the ideology of the Muslim Brotherhood. And among the many people who were joining the Brotherhood at the time was Zainab's older brother, Muhammad Al-Ghazali. On the other hand, her younger brother Ali took a different direction and joined the socialist movement. Zainab continued her education despite the fact that her brother Muhammad, who was a member of the Brotherhood, opposed it because he worried that Cairo was not a safe city for women. But she had support from Ali, the leftist, who stood against his brother Muhammad. To make everyone happy, Zainab studied Islamic sciences at Al-Azhar University. So Muhammad would take her to lectures by Sheikh Abdul Majid Al-Laban and Ali Mahfouz, while Ali would bring her books by Aisha Al-Taymuri and magazines by Huda Sha'rawi and Cheza Nabarawi. After finishing her sunnah lesson with the Sheikh, she would rush off to the headquarters of the Women's Union, which was led by Huda Sha'rawi. She then got to know Sha'rawi very closely and the two became good friends. During this period, scholars from Al-Azhar began to oppose the ideology of the Women's Union, leading to many lengthy debates. At this point, Zainab Al-Ghazali took center stage to defend the Women's Union and its cause. And so Huda Sha'rawi discovered Zainab's remarkable eloquence and powerful public speaking skills. So Huda approached her with an exceptional offer for a French scholarship that would enable her, along with two other girls, to study women's rights in France. And just like that, Zainab was granted the scholarship. However, while preparing for the trip, she had a dream in which she saw her late father warning her against traveling. Zainab took the dream seriously. She declined and apologized to Huda Sha'rawi, explaining how she had a premonition about this trip after she saw her father in the dream. And here Huda Sha'rawi snapped, saying to her, "What? Your father? Do you know the effort and cost involved? Because these scholarships to France were working wonders."
Who would refuse going to France? I can't afford Gamasa, and what wonders was France working?
Many wonders, my brother. Take, for example, Qasim Amin, who adopted a moderate Islamic ideology. The moment they sent him to France, he came back with the book, The Liberation of Women, in 1899, which contradicted everything he had preached before traveling. Or Rifa'a al-Tahtawi, the Azhar scholar, raised on the pillars of Islamic jurisprudence, theology, and Arab morals. When he returned from France, he wrote A Paris Profile, a book that shakes many Islamic standards and Arab and Oriental values. In the meantime, you have a book like The Return of the Hijab by Dr. Muhammad Ismail al-Muqaddim. This book has been banned from publishing in Egypt up until this day, just to show you what kind of ideology is allowed to be spread among people.
Wrap it up and conclude. Do you seriously think my son Issam will check the sources? He hasn't bathed in 2 years. Tell him the story and he'll get it.
Alright, let me share an interesting story about Huda Sha'arawi, the women's rights activist, the strong independent woman whose slogans are repeated today. The story, my brother, is related to her son, Muhammad Sha'arawi.
Wait right there. So her family name is Sha'arawi and her son's family name is also Sha'arawi. How come? Stop your lies. Aren't you afraid of Allah?
She shares the same family name as her son because back then elite circles followed the Western system where a woman took her husband's surname after marriage. Huda Sha'arawi's real name was Nur al-Huda Muhammad Sultan, so she changed her name after she married to Ali Pasha Sha'arawi. Also, Safiya Mustafa Fahmi had changed her name after her marriage to Saad Pasha Zaghlul, became known as Safiya Zaghlul, and so on and so on. The important thing, my dear, is that Mohammed Sha'arawi, the son of Huda Sha'arawi, our advocate for women's rights and feminism. Her son fell in love with a singer named Fatma Seri, who was quite famous at the time. Fatma was divorced and had 2 children, but Muhammad Bey, a man of noble lineage, kept pursuing her until they had a little baby girl named Layla. Fatma then asked him to marry her, but Muhammad refused. So she went to the leader of the women's movement, Huda Sha'arawi. Our singer Fatma complained to Huda about how her son Muhammad deceived her and refused to acknowledge his own daughter. And suddenly the women's rights advocate shifted from defending women to defending her son. Are you seriously going to accuse my son? No, darling, I know your little games. Did he force you to be with him? Go play your tricks on someone else. I am not an easy bait, darling. What happened to you? Aren't you standing by women's right anymore, or is it all just pretenses? This unfortunate story was published under the title Memoirs of a Singer in Al-Masra magazine in 1927. The link is in the sources below for those deceived by the alleged strong woman and her alleged honorable history. The case of Safiya was the first paternity case in Egyptian history. Huda Sha'arawi herself was married at the age of 13 to Ali Pasha Sha'arawi, who was 53 years old at the time, so he was 40 years older than her. Imagine the outrage if an Islamist did the same. He would be publicly shamed as a dishonorable man and a disgrace. This is just show you society's double standards. Regardless, let's go back to Zainab. Zainab Al-Ghazali was in the kitchen in 1935 making lunch when suddenly the oven exploded and the fire caught her body. She was bedridden, and during her long recovery, she went through a major shift in her ideology. She had witnessed all the scandals you've just heard about and started to reflect on her life. So she started wondering, if I had died at that moment, how would I face Allah? Living among these deceitful elites, knowing all their scandals and false slogans, how did I drift so far from my father and his circle? This eloquence and this ability of persuasion and public speaking skills that Allah granted me, why would I just throw it away like that? Why wouldn't I use it to serve a noble cause? Just like Nawal el-Sadawi shifted from a religious orientation to the extreme left, well, the exact opposite happened to Zainab al-Ghazali. And here we have to stop and make an important note. The seed you plant might grow astray, but sooner or later it will return to its roots. So plant the right seed and leave the outcome to the Creator. Zainab then emerged from her isolation and illness as a completely different person, determined to establish the Muslim Women's Association in 1937, while she was still just 20 years old. And within just 1 year, she had a select group of elite Egyptian women under her influence listening to her powerful speeches. Hassan al-Banna invited her to integrate her remarkable entity into the Muslim Brotherhood and to also become the head of the women's section within the Brotherhood. However, she refused and insisted on keeping it completely independent. In 1942, a well-known Sufi figure in Egypt at the time, Sheikh Muhammad al-Hafiz al-Tijani, the leader of the Tijani order, proposed marriage to Zainab. We might actually have an episode on Sufism because true Sufism isn't like today's version with mystical chants and rituals. It has completely shifted from its original order. Zainab and her husband divorced 2 years later. No children, no financial claims, mainly because of her active preaching and clashes between her ideology and that of her husband's. In September 1948, she met Hassan al-Banna just 5 months before his assassination, and she finally agreed to join the Brotherhood out of conviction. By the way, you'll find the critics attacking her because of the few words she said in this video.
I picked up a small piece of paper and wrote the following. To Mr. Imam Hassan al-Banna, the General Guide of the Muslim Brotherhood, Zainab al-Ghazali al-Jubayli is as of today. And from this moment, a devout servant of the cause, You may order her and direct her as you wish in the service of the dawah. You might invest her skills for the sake of the dawah.
Of course, this statement is exaggerated. The real point here is that she was expressing her belief in the ideology and her commitment to it, no matter the circumstances.
No, sorry, Abuda, the meaning is clear, man. No need for excuses.
Do people still have slaves nowadays, Essam? So if I really cared about you and if I told you that I would give you an eye if you needed it, does it mean that I will literally give you my eye?
Yes, I get you. So what happened next?
It happened that in 1951, Zainab Al-Ghazali remarried a religious businessman, Haj Muhammad Sajjad. But the happiness didn't last. 1 year later, in 1952, the military coup happened, which is now called the July 23rd Revolution. You know how it is, right? And when it comes to the military and Islamists, these two don't mix at all. The military knows how to operate under the dark, so any shining light is immediately extinguished. As a result, her older brother Muhammad was sentenced to hard labor in the staged assassination attempt on Abdel Nasser in 1954. After that, Zainab Al-Ghazali focused on relief work, helping the families of detainees. In 1957, she traveled to perform Umrah, and while in Mecca, she met Hajj Abdel Fattah Ismail, a known leader of the Muslim Brotherhood. There, the two agreed on reviving the Brotherhood after it's been censored by Abdel Nasser. Meanwhile, Sayyid Qutb have recently come back from America. Most importantly, Abdel Nasser's hostility toward the Brotherhood grew, particularly after Sayyid Qutb refused to work with him and was detained. Then, Abdel Nasser summoned Zainab Al-Ghazali in 1965 when she was 48. But Zainab did not only refuse to work in his office or to merge the entity she worked for so hard into his corrupt military organization, Zainab completely rejected to meet Abdel Nasser. She responded by saying that she cannot shake a hand stained with Abdel Qadir Oda's blood, who was executed by Abdel Nasser in 1954. Imagine what Abdel Nasser in his grandeur might do in response to such rejection. Abdel Nasser, who had dedicated all the governmental establishments to glorify him, this same arrogant man was disdained by a mere citizen. Zainab Al-Ghazali, who when asked about her dowry by her husband, responded that her dowry was to be his wife, but if her faith needed her to serve its cause, then her faith comes first. She did not mind what kind of furnitures or gold she would get. Her only condition to accept marriage was that. And indeed, her husband agreed to her condition, awaiting the day she mentioned. And that day came at the dawn of August 20th, 1965. Zainab Al-Ghazali was snatched from her ransacked home, and she was neither taken to a police station nor to a prosecutor's office or a trial. Instead, she went straight to a military prison and into Shams Badran's hands, Abdel Nasser's enforcer. Do you know who Shams Badran was? Well, in her book, Days of My Life, Haja Zainab told of Abdel Nasser's tyranny and oppression and Shams Badran's depravity on a frail woman in her 50s. She wrote, "A door to a dark room creaked open. They pushed me inside. I was frightened. I whispered, Bismillah, Assalamu alaikum. The door slammed shut with a bang that made my heart leap. The room was full of raging dogs. They were real dogs, trained to attack and torture, baring their fangs at bare flesh. These were dogs that knew exactly how to wound and inflict pain without killing. I remember screaming, opening my eyes, then shutting them again in sheer horror. I kept repeating, 'Steady my steps, O God! Steady my steps, O God!' All I could hear are the shouts of the criminals outside the room mixed with the howling of the dogs inside. Hours of torment passed before the cell door finally opened and I was taken away to the interrogation room. She was insulted and cursed with the most obscene words because she didn't confess, and in reality she didn't confess. Not because she was tough or strong, but simply because there was nothing to confess in the first place. There were no charges against her either. And then there would be a day when she thought the criminals had forgotten about her, only to be dragged at the end of that day to a wooden cross. Imagine, a helpless woman bound to a cross and flogged 500 lashes 9 times over the 3 days she was imprisoned there. A group of men stood there laughing, dressed in military uniforms, while her screams mixed with the sound of the whips. Then the criminal Shams Badran approached her and said, "So, where is your God now, Zainab? You say he reigns on his throne, then why isn't he saving you, Zainab?" To which she replied, "He acts as he wills." She continues and tells that he said, "If your God came down here, I would imprison him." She replied, "Glory to him." Zainab fainted many times, and her frail body couldn't endure the torture. The criminals would drag her by her hair to the prison hospital, where she would recover for a day or two before she was sent back to the eternal torment, horrors known only to God, the Almighty. Zainab used to say that she wished she could go back to the rabid dogs tearing at her flesh. It was more merciful than these military brutes. the water cells, the fire rooms, and being deprived of food for 5 or 6 days until her trial came, where she would stand in the cage and be sentenced to death. But then the King of Saudi Arabia, King Faisal, intervened with Abdel Nasser, and indeed Abdel Nasser commuted the sentence to life imprisonment. Yet by the will of the all-hearing, all-knowing, just 6 years later, in 1980, Abdel Nasser passed away. Then came Sadat, who wanted to erase Nasser's ideology and socialism using the Islamists. So he released Hajja Zainab from prison in 1971, just 6 years after the life sentence that Abdel Nasser had intended for her. Abdel Nasser, who had wanted her death despite his tyranny and power, could not prevent his own death. Hajja Zainab returned to her home, and regardless of her weakness and lack of means, she was determined to resume her mission. She began her journey across the Arab and Islamic world, influencing people and fulfilling her message to the fullest, until Hajja Zainab passed away on August 3rd in the year 2005 at the age of 88. She dedicated her life to serving her faith and its cause. Whether she was affiliated with the Muslim Brotherhood or the Salafis was her personal choice, and she was free to decide. But one can never deny that she was a great woman, a person of principle, deserving of the highest respect. The official Egyptian television that is now calling her the mother of terrorists had previously produced a series about her in 2011 called al-Sabirin, Mother of the Patient. Back then, they saw her as the steadfast and struggling woman, thus named her the most patient. She was portrayed by Rania Mahmoud Yassin. Post-coup, falsifications returned. Sabrin played her with a wig, reframing her as the mother of terrorists in Egypt. What a disgrace. Shameless people with not an ounce of self-respect, no morals, no principles, and no integrity. And that's why Allah humiliates them constantly. Every time they try to tarnish someone's image, it backfires on them, because that's how divine justice works. Then Allah elevates her status and grants her justice in just 15 minutes in a 3 square meter room. People will come to know Zainab Al-Ghazali for the first time because of their ignorance and stupidity. Because they drew attention to her, many will download her book to verify their claim and will find out how deceitful they are. Once again, they've proven themselves to be nothing but petty, insignificant, and utterly lacking in self-respect. Nobody will even consider them, let alone listen to them. And that's it, my brother. Assalamu alaikum.